Right now, there's a lot of people going through a spiritual awakening that are not aware of it. A lot of times, there is no clear indicator. However, you can usually detect it in your body. Your body goes through actually quite a lot of different changes. It's said that the spiritual awakening process is not just a change in perspective in the way you see the world, yourself, and reality. It's an actual biological evolution and upgrade. And as this transition ensues, there's a myriad of different, sometimes bizarre, sometimes even concerning side effects physically that people feel. And when I started going through my spiritual awakening, I had a lot of these signs, a lot of these symptoms, a lot of these physical changes that caused me to be very concerned because I didn't know what was happening to me. And that's why I'm making this video. I'm going to share with you the 10 most common physical side effects that you are in fact going through a spiritual awakening. One of the most common ones is a fluctuation in your energy levels. You might find that you sometimes feel like you're 20 years younger, just firing on all cylinders, full of just inspiration, feeling good about yourself, just in a really elevated mood, but also with increased energy, where you just get a lot done around the house, you get a lot done at work, you feel very productive, and then all of a sudden, for no reason that you can detect, you feel the exact opposite. You feel exhausted. You feel just 20 years older than you are now for no reason. You wake up and you just have no pep in your step. You feel just like extreme fatigue. When this happened to me, I went to doctors. I looked it up online because I was thinking, there's no reason I should be this tired. I didn't run a marathon yesterday. I didn't, lift a bunch of weights. I just had an average day. And then for no reason whatsoever, I'd wake up exhausted. And I would think, a cold must be coming on. I might have the flu or something, but no cold, no flu would come. I would just feel exhausted. Not just physically, but mentally exhausted. Just like my creative energy has been zapped, my vitality missing, and I don't know why I'm feeling this way. The fatigue is a very, very, very common one. In fact, one of my favorite teachers, Adishante, he one time, when he first had his spiritual awakening, he was into, I think, triathlons. He was like some kind of endurance athlete or something. And he was in good shape, obviously. He was young and very fantastic condition to be able to do a triathlon. And he found himself so exhausted to where he would be in bed for like months, unable to train, unable to function pretty much. And the doctors didn't know what was going on with him. He was just exhausted. He didn't know that it was part of this sort of physical, biological upgrade. I had a teacher one time tell me going through a spiritual awakening is kind of like putting 240 volts of electricity through a 120 volt socket. It can sometimes fry the system. It can kind of fry your nervous system. And while at some time when you get jolted with all the energy, you're like, whoa, you feel like Superman or Superwoman. But then it's like that's because your body's not yet equipped for that voltage. You'll see the swings, the high highs and the low lows, and it affects you very much on a physical level. Secondly, you might find that your senses are heightened. All of them, your sense of smell, your sense of taste, your sense of sight, everything. You just become very physically sensitive to what used to be just standard aspects of your everyday environment. All of a sudden, it's like wearing you out. It's getting you worked up. You might walk into a room and see maybe a heavy scene in a film or a TV series, and it just blasts you, just sticks with you. I remember one time, right after my spiritual awakening, I was driving in a parking lot, and it was my fault, but I almost caused an accident actually, where I didn't see someone coming up on my left, and then I finally did at the last second. I slammed on my brakes, and then they had to as well. And I remember looking over and seeing not just a look on this person's face, but their energy. It was like their energy was just like, brah! It felt like a wave. It felt like a wave of just anger and just disgust at my poor driving skills. But it was like, yeah, I could normally in the past look and tell when someone's upset or angry, but this is something where I felt that person's anger. And it wasn't just for that moment, it stuck with me. It sort of clung to me. I felt off like all day because of that one moment. Now, you might find this also with your food. You might find that all of a sudden, it's not only that your taste is different, but you become more sensitive to like the effects of food, I think is more accurately put. For example, for me, when I went through my awakening, I found that I like naturally began to clean up my diet a lot because I could tell a lot of the foods I was eating were causing me to be, either fatigued or foggy in my brain, or even affect my mood, my level of happiness. I found that, for example, when I would eat sweets or processed foods, not only would I become more fatigued, not only would I become more foggy in my mind, but I would also become kind of like bingy and impulsive and just kind of like more impulsive is the best way to put it. And these are things I was eating, without even giving it a second thought for the longest time. For some of you, it might be your sense of touch. All of a sudden, you might just not want to be like touched or hugged without warning, or being in a crowded. I was in London recently, and I got used to using the subway system. Yeah, the subway system, I think it's called. Pretty cool, little public transportation system they have going there. Very very efficient. And a lot of times I would luck out and it would be not empty, but I'd get a seat, or it wouldn't be a big deal, or I wouldn't be on the train very long, or the tram. But there was this one time my wife and I were coming back from this cool castle, and it was so packed. I remember like being surprised that when we entered the tram, it was already like very, very packed, more than I've ever seen. And then people just kept piling in to the point where like you didn't even have to hang on because you were just like stuck there between people. You weren't going anywhere. We were all just sort of packed like sardines in a can in that subway station. But something like that, now years later, it was really not a big deal. But there was a time in my life, a time in my awakening where that would have literally maybe caused a panic attack. It would have just been too much, too sensitive, too many people, too many moods, too many personalities, too much energy, all like sort of enclosing in on me. And it sounds like a overly hyped up dramatic thing. Like, okay, bro, you were just in a subway. Is that really a big deal? But there was a point where it was. There was a point where I didn't even want to go into a grocery store because of all the energy of all the people, all the emotions. I could feel it. And it was kind of like going back to that analogy of like too much electricity for the circuit. It was like too much data, too much input for my nervous system to like make sense of. And it caused me to feel very ungrounded and very disoriented and very uncomfortable. But nonetheless, all of these things were kind of like not an issue before, maybe to a small extent. Obviously, some people are just naturally uncomfortable in enclosed spaces with lots of people, but it becomes where you take a massive jump in your sensitivity of all of your different senses. And you know what? In the beginning, I would look online and find, content like this and wonder, when is it going to be done? When am I going to become normal again? When is my sensitivity going to wear off? But what I found in going through it is that sensitivity, though, yeah, it's kind of like a lot all at once, and there's an adjustment period for sure. Eventually, or not even eventually, like right away, it helps you make wiser choices, because now you know how all the various things in your life affect you. The food you eat, the water you drink, the people you're around, the areas you go into. Before, you were oblivious. You didn't know that you were maybe putting yourself in a very incompatible situation, or feeding your body things that are like not at all resonating with your biochemistry in your system. And now you know better. And yeah, it does sort of force you to make a lot of adjustments all at once, and of course endure this period of heightened sensitivity. But again, what does that really imply? It implies greater awareness. All of your sensory capacities becoming more sensitive, it implies you are more aware. And when you're more aware, you can make wiser choices. And you might find that you do. You might have to clean up your diet a little bit, at least for now. You might have to maybe avoid going into crazy, busy, stimulating places for now. You might find that you're not really wanting to watch The Sopranos or True Blood or whatever you're like into, Dexter, some of my shows I enjoy. Ozark, like these intense shows might be like, no bueno, this is not, I can't do this. It's affecting my sleep. It's affecting my mood. It's scaring me, And for a while, you're kind of like this sensitive little bird. But again, this sensitive little bird is making these adjustments. And imagine if you had this opportunity to rearrange your life, your diet, your behavior, your habits, where you go, where you don't go, to where it's now all in harmony. And that same sensitivity isn't going anywhere, but it's going to now be able to enjoy the goodness of life. What I said kind of sounds like a drag initially, but that same sensitivity also opens you up to being equally sensitive to higher states of creativity, being really in touch with nature. If you're feeling this way, by the way, go into nature, go climb a mountain, go in the woods. You're gonna feel amazing. You're gonna realize, like, wow, this is like an oasis for my life, a sanctuary for my nervous system. It might cause you, and naturally will cause you. Human beings are basically wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's a survival, biological sort of part of our makeup. And you're gonna do this naturally, but now with more accuracy. And you'll start arranging your life to where you can experience higher highs, greater states, higher octaves of joy and happiness and love and compassion and peace. But it's kind of a shock. So if you're going through it and you're feeling a bit out of sorts, that's okay. I was there. When I went through this, I was a personal trainer and I had to go to work. I had to go to work and sort of intermingle with people, 8, 5, 10, 8 people a day. And it was a lot. It was a kind of quite an intense experience for me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is not ideal. The state I'm in, it's not ideal for me to have to go to work. At the same time, for me, it lasted a little while there, a few years, and I couldn't afford to not work. So it's doable. And you might be in my shoes where you're like, Vic, I'm going through this, man, but I got a toxic roommate. What do I do? I live in like a really a low vibe area. What do I do? My job is very low vibe. What do I do? You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You are where you're meant to be, my friend, and you'll be just fine. And there's actually value in learning how to ground into yourself in these situations. And that's what happens eventually. You don't make a bunch of choices and elevate yourself to where now it's just you by yourself in nature, living in the woods, so you don't have to deal with this. You learn that you can deal with this. You can be in a good state of consciousness while in the tram, while at work, no matter what's happening. But it's a process, my friend, and it takes some time to get to that point. I'm still working at it myself. I'm not all the way there, but there was a point in my life where I didn't know if it would ever go away. I didn't know if I'd ever feel normal again, and now I feel like 90% better. And again, there's been so many benefits that have come from that transition. You might also notice that your sleep patterns change. Not in a very predictable linear way, mind you. Probably might feel kind of erratic. You might have times where you sleep like way longer than normal, and then you might have times where you don't sleep at all for no reason, even though you need it. I remember when I went through this is one of the things that really I resisted the most, because at the time I was really into fitness and working out, and I was concerned I was going to lose my gains and things like that, because it is important to sleep. And I would just sometimes go to bed and I'd lay there and I'd look at the ceiling and I would just know sleep is not going to happen. I would just know. I just lay there. And in the beginning I would fight it. And I would I'd go online. What are 10 things to do? Drink a cup of milk, do this, go on, take a bath, all these different things I tried. Nothing worked, literally. It was like my body just had too much energy. I felt, for whatever reason, overstimulated, probably for the reason I just said. All the input my body didn't know what to do with, and I would just lay there. But eventually, what I realized is that, you know what, I'm not wasting my time laying here. I just get up and I'd read, or I'd do something, I'd hang out, watch some TV, and I found that even with my erratic sleep patterns, that I was always okay When I really needed to sleep, I would sleep. When I didn't actually need to sleep, I wouldn't sleep. And I came to kind of trust it and not resist it so much. And it continued for a little while there, but it didn't affect me as much as my resistance to it affected me. So if you're experiencing this, it's okay. Now, some of you might have some sort of bizarre experiences at night, which I did. I would have very, very vivid, otherworldly type of nightmares at times where it seemed like I was going to other places and experiencing other like malevolent entities, and they would like pick on me and haunt me. You know, people call them negative entities. That was part of it. I also would have like mystical type of experiences sometimes laying there in bed. I would see like colors and shapes and geometric patterns, and I would feel a lot of energy moving through my body, which I'll talk about later on. But there was like a whole experience sometimes just laying there in bed. And that, either of those would keep me up at times as well for other reasons. But nonetheless, your sleep is probably not gonna be like stable right after a spiritual awakening. And that might as well bring me to my next point, which is energy surges in your body. You might feel what I would call like electrical type psychic-y energy sort of moving through your body, your physical body. It's not this imaginative thing. It can be an actual physical experience where there's noticeable sensations of like vibratory type of energy moving through your body. Oftentimes it will make its way up your spine. Sometimes it'll get kind of stuck in places and you'll feel maybe a buildup of like pressure, you know, chakra pressure people call it. And sometimes that chakra pressure can sort of fester for a while and result in maybe even a rash or some really bizarre like manifestation of this energy trying to kind of like cleanse you and purify you. But nonetheless, when it first starts to happen, it's quite unusual. You wonder like, am I okay? Is this okay? Who do you go to for this sort of situation? Who can I talk about it? How do I even mention it to my doctor? What are they going to think? They're not going to do anything. They're going to have their opinions. They're going to tell you you're fine. And it's just something you go through. That's why I'm making this video, so you know it's actually quite common. Some people experience it very intensely. I did it on the intense side of the spectrum. Some people it's very subtle. Some people it's not even something that they really go through that much, and it's okay. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're more evolved or less evolved or more awakening or less. It's just, it affects everybody differently. Number 5, I did touch on this a bit, but I want to kind of emphasize it now because it is kind of a big deal. But you might find a fluctuation in your appetite and again, in your food preferences. I would have times where I felt like I could not get enough protein. Like my body was just lacking like sustenance, and I was just ravenous, and I would eat and eat and eat, but I wouldn't feel like I was filling up. I didn't feel like it was doing what it was supposed to do or something. Other times I'd eat and the food would just sit there in my stomach. Sometimes for like a day or two, it felt like a lump of food is in my stomach doing nothing. No digestion taking place whatsoever, no appetite. The thought of food sort of repulsed me. And then within that, my food preferences changed wildly. When I first had my awakening, I was very, as I said, into fitness and working out and lifting weights and things like that. And I remember getting really turned off by red meat after a little while. And it just felt heavy. It felt like it was just sitting there. It felt like my body just saying no to it. And then I felt a little better once I gave up the red meat. And then the same thing happened with chicken and fish. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll become like a vegetarian and eat a lot of eggs and things like that. And then the eggs became an issue. Then I became like a strict vegan for a time. And then even that, I became discerning with the types of vegan foods. I couldn't eat the processed, the fake meats, that kind of stuff. That was like no good for my body. And I was just eating lots of fruits and vegetables and very, very like pure foods. And then I went to like the raw food diet for about 6 months to a year, which was really extreme. Something I never in a million years would have ever believed if someone told me that I would be eating that way. I was really quite surprised. And it wasn't something I did because of like what I read or my beliefs. It was more so It was what I was just listening to my body. And then I got locked in there for a time when I was a raw vegan for a while. And then I thought, okay, well, what's the next step? You don't eat food at all? Just juices or something? And then for a while, I was feeling pretty good, actually. I felt really clear-headed, very, very spiritually open. But then my body started to kind of, as you might expect, feel like it was missing a lot. And eventually I was actually reluctant to go back to eating cooked foods and animal proteins and things like that, but I had to. My body was just like, it had enough. It was a cycle I went through, and then I went back into eating normal. And now I find myself eating a very clean, balanced diet, I would say. I feel still very in tune with my body, but it's much more well-rounded, you might say. And my advice to you is something I wish someone would have told me at this time, is not to get too stuck on something. When I became like a raw vegan, I was like, okay, I'm Victor Odo, the raw vegan. This is my identity, and this is who I am. They're my beliefs sort of connected to it. And then when my body was sort of like screaming, begging, pleading, you got to eat something heavier than this. You're withering away. I was like 30 pounds lighter than you see me now. I like put it off. I put it off until I absolutely couldn't, until I was just getting sick all the time, and I was just like, I couldn't deny that my body was just not thriving in eating that way. It was meant to be a short-term thing for me anyways. Some of you might get there and stay there, fine. Some of you might never do that, that's fine too. I went through a time when it was like I would be judgmental of different diets and assess people based upon their intake, assess their spirituality and things like that. Very egocentric, spiritual ego nonsense, quite frankly. And what I've learned is that our bodies are unique. It'll nonetheless, you'll know what you should be eating and what you shouldn't be eating. Okay, you'll have experiences. One time, as an example, when it was my last day eating fish, I was living in Florida. My wife and I bought these nice big lobster tails, which are like, a delicacy. They're very delicious to most people. And we ate them, we boiled them up, and we ate them. And I remember feeling like I had taken on the fear of that lobster. I felt just filled with fear energy. My wife felt the exact same thing. And it was like, wow, it was this undeniable, trippy, bizarre experience with the lobster tail. And that was like, okay, I guess that was like my cue to give up seafood for a while. But anyways, nonetheless, my friend, if you don't know this, you just might think you're sick, or you might think you have a parasite or something. You might think something serious is going on, but I'm telling you, I've been making these videos for 8 years, talking to thousands of people just like you. All of what I said is actually very, very common. It's okay, and it balances out in time. Some of you might feel heart palpitations. I mentioned the energy moving and things like that, but it can be kind of concerning when it's in your heart. And if you look it up online, you can go down several different rabbit holes. You could think you're days away from having a life-threatening stroke. You could think you have some kind of like arrhythmia or some kind of like, AFib or some kind of heart malfunction. A lot of sites will say, oh, it's just anxiety. Nonetheless, it's a very common thing that happens to people spiritually awakening for whatever reason. I've never once heard of anybody having it in a very serious way. And for me, when it would happen, it would usually honestly be correlated with like some type of heart expansion, some type of increase in my capacity to feel and to experience my own body love and compassion and connectedness with people. It was almost like I was being kind of adjusted or upgraded or something in my heart. There were other times though where it was a sign of my anxiety, and it was like a good message to spend more time doing self-care and things like that. I was like too worked up, and it was manifesting in that way. But nonetheless, which way you put it, it's a lot of times you can learn from it, or again, it's an indicative of like a positive, expansive thing. And a lot of times intuitively you'll know. You'll kind of sense it intuitively. So I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying like never get it checked out, but I would say at the very least in the beginning, initially just check with your intuition. And for what it's worth, it's very common. It happens to a lot of people, happened to me, and it kind of goes away and oftentimes represents a good thing. One of the less glamorous experiences that's pretty common is like a physical detox sort of symptom, which could be headache, feeling achy. I used to wake up feeling achy, like super, super old and achy. And I went through this when I was in my early 20s, and there was no reason I should be like that achy. I wasn't really working out hard or anything, but I would feel just awful. Honestly, like even regular, easy, I wasn't even working at the time, but just like going through my day felt just exhausting and just difficult. I felt just so achy. During that time, I would also get a lot of rashes, a lot of like breakouts to my body, which were super aggravating, honestly, because I didn't know what the cause was, and it was kind of frustrating, honestly. But it's kind of like you go through a purge, like a physical detox, a physical purge, a purification is basically what's happening with the spiritual awakening. It's a purification of, yes, your soul, you could say, your psyche, your emotional body, yeah, big time, but also your physical body. And a lot of times it's all connected anyways. You know, one of the things I picked up along the way is taking people through past life regressions. For what it's worth, we don't have to get into that. You don't have to believe in that. That's fine. But nonetheless, I've done it with thousands of people, and there's a thing I see sometimes, and quite a bit actually, where someone has an experience in a past life, and then that experience, because it's not like resolved fully or emotionally brought to a conclusion in that life, it carries into the next life, this life, and it manifests itself as like a bad back or some kind of physical problem like that. And your spiritual awakening is kind of like purifying you on that level. You don't always have the connection of, oh, my fatigue is because of this or whatever, you know, but sometimes you do. Sometimes you will gain these insights. It's not important though, regardless. It's just, you're going through a purification, a very, as deep as it gets type of a purification. And it's uncomfortable at times to feel like you're detoxing when you don't really think you should be. But again, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's like a blessing. It's like we've been carrying around all these toxins, all this baggage, all this pain, all this unconsciousness, these patterns, these habits, these beliefs, all this stuff has just been in us, part of us, wreaking havoc on our bodies, on our health, on our lives, on our happiness. And now it's all coming up, it's coming out, and it's like it's a brutal process at times, but it's coming out. What's coming is going. Your rash is indicative of you expelling some type of probably deeply rooted pattern or pain or something, and it's a blessing. It's like we're being kind of healed, but healing, of course, sometimes it's a process. Like inflammation is actually your body's way of healing itself. But it's like, it can hurt, it can be uncomfortable. Similar metaphor applies to what I'm trying to say here. This next one isn't really physical, but it's worth mentioning. It's like a heightened intuition. Like you might just find yourself knowing stuff. Not like necessarily the mysteries of the universe, I don't mean that. I mean like in terms of your practical day-to-day affairs, navigating your life, what direction you should go down, what people are, have your best interests at heart, what people are kind of meant to be in your life or not at that time. Even all the things I'm saying, even though, your mind prior to this video maybe was like a little bit like concerned about all these things, I bet already before even seeing this, you had some type of intuition about, I feel like this is actually part of something. This maybe there's purpose here. You might even have the intuition like, I'm okay. Like when I would have the fatigue and stuff, my mind would get really worked up. On one level, I was like, what is happening? This is not good. But there's another part of me parallel to that kind of like knew it's temporary, it's connected to something positive, and it's not, I knew it wasn't a real health concern. I just knew that. So use it, use your intuition. Because we can choose where we rest where our gravity lies. If you allow yourself, your mind can go down the rabbit hole of WebMD and all this stuff, and you're gonna diagnose yourself with schizophrenia, bipolar, I'm dying tomorrow, cancer, heart attacks, all this crazy stuff. You could do that and you're gonna get yourself worked up and you're gonna You're going to create, not the actual experience, but you're going to create almost the illusion of it. And nonetheless, you're going to freak yourself out. That's something you can do and maybe have done. I am making this video. But you could also remember that it's an option, at least, to like sink into that part of you that knows. And honestly, even like if you do it for like a couple of breaths of just, what does my intuition think of all this? I'm good, it's fine, chill out, go on about your day. Okay, you can do that. You can do that, and then you can go on about your day. And you can take the edge off dramatically. That's the one thing I learned having gone through this, is I made it so much worse for myself with resistance. And intuitively, I knew better. I knew I don't need to be freaking out. Yes, I have no one to validate my intuition, and I could always question it and doubt it, but I knew. But I didn't really follow my advice, and I would get myself worked up. I'd go online, I'd bug out, so I'm just, hopefully I can spare you some of that. One thing worth noting is I can almost bet you feel a lot more physically sensitive to like EMF frequencies. Even being on a computer might all of a sudden feel disorienting. Watching a big screen TV, your phone, even to this day, I put my phone on airplane mode. It's never in my room when I sleep. And to this day, I remain quite sensitive to that. And I can also, on the other side of the token, I can feel the absence of it. I can feel, for example, I'm in a new house right now, but before, the last house we were living in, we were renting, and the owners, it was a beautiful home, but they had like an insane like electronic setup. They had flat screen TVs and speakers and Bluetooth all over the house. They had a theater room, all this crazy stuff going on. And there was like 5 different like Wi-Fi hubs, pulsing throughout the whole house. And I didn't notice how much that affected me until moving here into this house, which is much more expansive, much more in nature. We only have like one little Wi-Fi box or whatever. And it's like night and day, man, as far as like the absence of that. So if that is you and you're going through a bout like I have gone through over the years, honestly, of just feeling hypersensitive to that, just simple things you can do. You can you can keep your phone out of your room. Create a little sanctuary for yourself. Go into nature as much as possible. Watch less TV if it's getting you worked up. And just see how you feel. A lot of times, these frequencies, they can kind of, it's tricky because they're normal. It's normal to be on your phone for 6-8 hours a day. It's normal to watch 20-30 hours a week of television. It's normal to work from a computer all day. These are normal things. And because there's no immediate like physical ailment that seems to be like connected to it, everyone just does it. But within that, there's a lot of freedom. You can cut down your screen time in half. Every one of you, I guarantee you can, if you just put a little effort into it. Again, you can keep your phone away. You can take little measures like that to at the very least see if it helps or not. I predict it will help you tremendously because, again, what I was saying is when you're in these frequencies, you're naturally, if you notice, more anxious. You're more in like your reptilian fight or flight type of brain, and you're sort of temporarily disconnected from the peace that is also there, where we like get disconnected from it. And when you can access that peace within yourself, however you do, like you meditate or whatever, it can like literally transform the way you experience all of this. All of what I said is, it's going to happen to varying degrees to a lot of you, but how you experience it is a choice. And I didn't really own my power back in the day. I had a very sloppy, I navigated these waters in a very sloppy, uneducated way. And that's why I'm so intent on making these videos. To my defense, there wasn't anyone telling me straight up, like, this is what's happening, this is normal. This is, by the way, not coming just from me and my own little world. It's coming from dedicating my life to this mission of helping people navigate their spiritual awakening. I've been doing this for 8 years. This YouTube channel, if you can see, has like over 300,000 followers at the time of this. So a lot of what I'm saying is not just my own experiences from what I've observed, and thousands of people from all over the world reporting the exact same thing, surely you're having the mood swings. Most people have mood swings, but this is a bit on a different level. You might find that it takes less, at times anyways, to get you really worked up, hot and bothered, reactive. It also might take less to make you feel really choked up and touched. You know, my family and I are watching Lost right now for like the 8th time. It's my favorite TV show. And the last season of Lost, I don't want to spoil it actually, but there's some really touching scenes, you might say, where you watch the characters, I don't know, just the way the scenes play out. Sometimes it makes me feel so connected to like God, honestly, to the divinity, to what really matters to us as a soul, and just love, compassion, togetherness, all these things I watch on the screen, and it like I sometimes weep like a little baby, honestly. At the same time, you know, throughout my journey, it's been kind of like on and off where I feel hypersensitive emotionally and easily triggered. Sometimes it takes very, very little to provoke a big, big reaction. And again, you could look at that kind of like an annoying symptom to just wait out, but it's information. It's like you become more aware of these patterns that have always been there, always playing out, but you were more numb to it, and now you're not numb to it. But now because of that, because it's so uncomfortable, you can investigate it, you can do something about it, you can question it. Is my reaction really a fit for this? A lot of times the answer is no, not at all. Well, then it begs the question, well, why am I feeling this way? Where is this really coming from? And you start asking these types of questions, and you start getting these types of answers. And in doing so, you get to the root of this. And it's important to do that because many people, they're just so quick to go to the doctors because they think there's something wrong with feeling their feelings. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of options to like numb that out a little bit to where you're back to normal, but you're not. Now you're oppressed, but oblivious. You're sleepwalking. I say go into those emotions, face them. Don't numb yourself to them. Don't distract yourself from them. It's hard not to. Do your best. It's not a perfect thing I'm suggesting, but because underneath those emotions is the real you. You know, one of the things I do is I guide people through a somatic breathwork ceremony. Some of you may have done it who are watching. And it's a very, very powerful experience, very, very healing. You confront a lot of these deeper emotions. And it's so interesting, having even gone through it myself, when I do it myself, there are like layers to emotions. For example, what can sometimes start off as anger, you're releasing anger and you're mad and you're yelling and you're like, oh, I'm so mad. Underneath that is hurt. I've been hurt. I'm afraid. And that's uncomfortable, but underneath that is peace, joy, connectedness. So you could stay avoiding the anger with some Valium or whatever, or you can go through the anger, through the sadness, getting to the peace, residing there until the next storm springs out forth from your body, provoked by some seemingly kind of benign situation. Nonetheless, it's happening again. And this is just a reoccurring emotional purification process that I recommend just getting used to. It's something that most of these things I suggest, like the sleep, the physical symptoms, the hypersensitivity, the crazy dreams, although I sometimes do have them still, those subside pretty quickly, honestly. But this emotional purification process is cleansing for most, it goes on for quite some time. So it's better, in my opinion, to accept it as just a part of your life now, rather than just try to getting to the bottom of everything with earnestness, knowing that even if you do, it's gonna be something else, some other wound you're processing next. And then you can make it kind of overwhelming for yourself, which I've also done. So just be patient with this part, is what I would say. So as you may have noticed, I mostly only talked about the physical aspect of the awakening process. There's a whole other spectrum, maybe even more like of a concern and relevant to you And that has to do with more of like the metaphysical implications, the spiritual side effects, the life situational changes. You probably, parallel to what I'm saying, you might be going through a lot of changes with your job and your identity and all these other things. And that's why I made this video. This talks about the signs you're going through the dark night of the soul. And the intention is the same. If you're going through it and you know you're going through it, your experience of it, so too with what I just said, can be way different. You can navigate it with more ease and grace and presence and less stress and less unnecessary anguish. So if you relate with this video and you're still in the process of learning about this, I highly recommend watching the signs you're going through the dark night of the soul. And that's going to give you a whole other dimension of information about this process, this beautiful process you're going through.